Hello, and welcome to a re-recording of our March 1st Wednesday webinar, Exploring Philadelphia with PolicyMap. We're redoing the webinar because PolicyMap wasn't behaving very well that day, and I'd like you to see it at its best, not at its worst. I'm Kathleen Turner. I'm the subject librarian for health sciences and some social sciences subject areas, and I love maps. So I'm going to show you some of the things that I enjoy about PolicyMap. PolicyMap was first developed in 2007 as a way of making geographic data easily accessible and understandable for policy makers. It is actually a data warehouse with over 50,000 indicators that's accessible through a state-of-the-art mapping and analytics platform. So really the way that you can think of it is a data search engine that looks like a map. Currently, the data in PolicyMap is almost entirely US data. Would love to see them expand to other countries, but what they've done with US data is really pretty remarkable. You can connect to PolicyMap through our database's A to Z list, or you'll find it listed on many of our library guides. Answering a question that one of my colleagues asked last Wednesday, you don't have to be on the VPN to use PolicyMap when you're not on campus. It most of the time works just fine going through our usual proxy server login. Before we dive into working on the map, I just want to show you very quickly that linked from the top of the page, you can actually see a data directory that lists the different data indicators, and for each one, the years and the geographies for which it's available. You can also dig a layer deeper to see the actual data sources and details about each one. As you can see, many of the data sources are US government agencies, but there are also some that are taken from proprietary sources and available only to PolicyMap subscribers, which of course includes us. So the first thing that you want to do when you start on PolicyMap is sign in and create your own account. Creating your own account on PolicyMap gives you your own space where you can save your work, including maps that you've created and custom regions that you've created yourself that you might want to go back and use in the future. So I'm already logged into my account, and as you can see, I can find all of my saved works, things that I've downloaded or exported are all right here. If I weren't signed in, there would be an option up here on the top menu to create my own account. So generally, the first thing that you want to do starting in PolicyMap is choose a location that you want to look at. And you can do that either by just clicking through on the map. And as you can see, it will open up a legend identifying the specific location that you clicked on, or by searching up from the toolbar. And as you can see, you can look at the different levels of locations that you can search for. Incidentally, I wouldn't recommend trying to search by census tract. I'll show you another way to get to that. Let's say that we want to look at all of Philadelphia. It, of course, gives us a choice of whether we're looking at the city or the county, which are essentially the same thing, or the places named Philadelphia in other states. So we'll take the city of Philadelphia here and we'll zoom in a little bit more. Now, as you can see up here at the top of the location that it's outlined for me, I can choose different options, one of which is to clip it, which basically will let me display data that I'm selecting only within the boundaries of Philadelphia. So let's see what kind of data that we can find about Philadelphia. Again, I could use the search box here, but they've also given me these great categories that let me explore different types of data more easily. So I could look perhaps under housing. And again, I've got broad categories, each of which sorts out into smaller categories. Many of those break down further as well. So I could look at something like home sales. And one of the categories that interests me is change in housing prices. So when I open this up, it gives me a legend over here to the side. And it tells me that this is based on Federal Housing Finance Agency data. And it's showing me the percent change in the annual housing price index between 2019 and 2020. Now it's shaded by census tract. And if I click on that, I can see the other geographies that I could choose. That's an important thing to look at. Because if, for example, you're trying to look at something at the census tract level, but the smallest geography for the data indicator you've chosen is by county, then you're just going to see the entire map of Philadelphia County colored. We're going to stick with census tract level, and I can look over here at the legend. It's showing me different data levels of starting at 1.2% up to 7.8% or greater. Our statisticians could probably give you all kinds of information about why it chooses the different breakdowns it does, but you can actually change them if you wanted to. You can move your sliders around so that you're choosing different data levels, or you can go back to the default. And you can also choose different colors. Now, this is interesting data to look at, but to make it more interesting, maybe we want to look at more information about the locations that we're looking at. One of the things that we can do is turn on some of the map boundaries. So we're going to come up here to the boundary choice. And you'll see that there's a lot of standard boundaries, but Philadelphia actually gets some extra ones. We get some bonuses because PolicyMap was actually developed here in Philadelphia. So they add some additional boundary categories for us. So we could map school catchment area boundaries. And maybe we actually want to zoom in on our map a little bit further. And as we're looking at the boundaries, as we point to different areas, if we point to a census tract, it will tell us what the actual percentage change data is for that census tract. It also, as we're pointing at the different school boundaries, tells us what the particular school catchment area is that we're looking at. And as you can see, you can zoom in more closely to look at the data more specifically. Zoom out again. And if we wanted to, we could capture this whole map at this point. By exporting it as an image, or by saving it to use again in the future. Now, the data that we're looking at right now is what's called layer data. It's data about a spatial area. There's also data in PolicyMap that is point data rather than layer data. And we could look at some of that. For example, we could look at food locations. So grocery store retail locations is showing up here as point data. And of course, this isn't very meaningful unless you're zooming in closer. But we can also filter it a little bit to the type of service level or the type of grocery retail that we're looking at. So we could look at sort of grocery supercenters, or we could look at, let's see, sort of conventional supermarket type grocery stores. Now I'm going to clear this out to show you one of the other really nice features of PolicyMap. And that's the ability to make your own custom regions. We're going to go back to Philadelphia. But let's say I want to look at just a particular region of Philadelphia. I can use the custom regions option to create a new region, and I can do it by drawing it, just drawing an outline with my cursor. I can do a radius. So, for example, I could choose a particular hospital location and draw a 1 mile or 2 mile or 5 mile radius around it. But I can also make an assembled region. And the first thing it's going to want me to do is to determine what type of boundaries Do I want to assemble a region made out of different zip codes, out of census tracts, block groups, or so on? And remember, I mentioned at the beginning, don't try to search for a census tract because it's difficult to get the formatting right. This is actually a really good way to find a particular zip code, a particular census tract. So if we wanted to come over here, and I'm zooming the map in, here we are at Drexel, right about there. If we wanted to assemble an area of the census tracts adjacent to the Drexel campus, we can actually do that just by selecting them like this. We probably don't want that one because it's mostly park. But we can select all of these census tracts. Give it a name and a description. And then I can choose what color I want my area to be. And I can change the level of transparency of that color. I could also edit the shape a little bit if I wanted to. And I can save that custom region so that I can come back and use it again in the future. Now, while I have my custom region here, I can add any kind of data to it. Let's say we just want to look at demographics, what the population is in our custom region of people between the ages of 18 and 34. And let's see if I can clip that to make it a little clearer. There we go. So that's a custom region. And as you can see, if I come back here to my saved work and look at my custom regions, there are all of the different regions that I've created from time to time so that I can go back and look at them. An additional option for creating maps in PolicyMap that gets considerably more complicated. So I'm just going to show you one that I've done rather than go through and recreate one, is multi-layer maps. This is a map where instead of choosing just one data indicator that you want to look at, you're looking at multiple data indicators. Previously, the only way to do that was basically combining those indicators, thinking in librarian terms as a Boolean and, finding locations that meet both criteria. You are now able to be a little bit more flexible in the way that you put multi-layer maps together, of combining the different indicators with or, in other words, criteria that meet locations that meet one criteria or another. So just to show you quickly, one of my multi-layer maps that I've played with. And I'm hoping that this will open up for you. It did just a little while ago. What this map would be showing you is I've gone back to our housing price indicator and I've set my slider so it's showing me any census tracts, because that's the smallest geography it will do, that are at least about 10% increase in housing price index. And then I'm adding into that any with at least 50% households who have moved into their home since 2010. And there we go. Now our data is showing. So what we can see here is that this area of West Philadelphia, because that's what my big boundary line is here, south of Baltimore Avenue, I know that this is adjacent to Clark Park because that's an area that I know very well, has had a pretty high turnover in households and an extremely high increase in the housing price index in that 1 year period. Now that's just a very, very quick look at all of the things that PolicyMap can do. As you can see, looking at the data categories across the top, looking at economic data, looking at education data, health data, federal guidelines, income and poverty data, which includes data on food insecurity. There's all kinds of things that you can do with it. And I would encourage you, the best way to learn to use PolicyMap, as with anything else, is dive into it and play with it. One thing that I didn't mention that was a question that was specifically asked at our webinar last week, any of the data that you can find, you can download the data. You can download it as a CSV file or machine readable. You can also, with the help of PolicyMap staff, who are very helpful people, you can actually upload your own data into PolicyMap so that you can use their mapping interface on top of it. Now, I also had one question that had me a little bit puzzled about whether you can compare different regions. It would be very difficult to display data comparing, for example, the city of Philadelphia to the state of Pennsylvania, although you could certainly download the data to do that. But you could absolutely create your own customized region that, for example, would include 2 separate zip codes in Philadelphia. or two different neighborhoods in Philadelphia. You would just select those in the custom boundary creation. They would not have to be adjacent to each other. And then you could display the same data in the two different zip codes. Again, I think I have probably only explored maybe 10% of what PolicyMap can do. I would recommend diving in, play with it, look at the places that you care about, and as their motto says, dig deeper. Have a good time with it. And thank you for joining us.